So, only 1 in 3 workers in the United States are actually engaged at work, which is kind of scary. It's actually pretty serious. So if you question the validity of this, I want to run through some of the numbers. Gallup actually has been asking this question repeatedly, month by month, for years. They've actually tracked 80,000 people, and they ask the questions of, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best? Is someone encouraging your development? And do you believe that your opinions actually count? Oklahoma is actually tied for number 5 across the states with a bunch of other states. So it's actually a little bit higher. It's 35% of the people are engaged in work. But what's scary is their definitions. Engaged in work, like those questions that I said, then there's not engaged. Which means that people are not fully putting their time in. That's half the people. Half the people aren't really, they just kind of let it go, or whatever. What's really scary is 1/6 of the people are actually actively disengaged. That means they're not just unhappy at work, but they're resentful. And their needs aren't being met, they're acting out because of their unhappiness, and they're actually undercutting those people that are actually engaged in their work. Also from Gallup, the 40-hour work week is pretty much a myth. On average, people work 47 hours, and quite a few people, 25% that are paid a salary, work over 60 hours a week. My name is Aaron Blythe. I came down here from Kansas City. I'm the lead organizer of DevOps Days KC. We have a conference coming up in September where we're going to get a lot of people in to talk about culture and tools and how developers and operations can work better together. I also run a monthly meetup on the same topics. So I'm known for doing a lot of crazy things in my talks. In the past, I've stood on my head to make a point. Earlier today, I used my Alexa to run an entire incident workflow from start to finish, and a number of other things. This one here is actually very personal to me. The things that I've seen, the name of the talk is called Trust, Just Culture, and Blameless Postmortems. So starting with trust, trust is something that we build over time by repeatedly being there for someone. It's very hard to build, but it's very easy to lose. And we're also going to talk about just culture today. Justice is defined as administering of a deserved punishment or reward. And when we think about justice, a lot of times in software, it actually is administered when a mistake or a violation occurs. And we're of course going to talk about blameless postmortems and a number of other type of meetings to help raise this engagement. So let me introduce you to our team. We've got Jennifer. She's a solid executive. She's a co-founder of the business. She's built the majority of the business herself from the ground up, and she doesn't dictate what the engineering team does. We got Rob. He's our manager. Rob used to code, but now he's the manager. Rob's schedule looks like this, full of 1-hour meetings throughout the day, leaving no space hardly in between to interact with his team. Rob doesn't like his job anymore. Rob optimizes his job on not getting in trouble and showing that he cares to the higher-ups. Rob's lost touch with his team, and his fuse has grown shorter and shorter. Rob has been saying more and more that his team doesn't have time and that they need more resources. Now we've got Ethan. He's a senior engineer on the team. Rob refers to him as his rock star. He goes to Ethan to get everything done. We also have a senior engineer on the team. Her name is Shelly. She's been at the company just as long as Ethan. She joined the team 2 years ago by her own choice because it was fresh. It was awesome. However, Shelly is unhappy, and she is actually looking actively right now for new jobs, but not sharing this with Rob because she hasn't built that trust. A new engineer joined the team earlier this year, fresh out of college. Tabitha, she likes to go by Tabby. She doesn't have that much work to do. No one's really giving her any work. Ethan works on things alone. Shelly's kind of out there. We got Michael. Michael's kind of weird. He's an intern. No one knows what to think of him. He just joined the team a couple months ago. He's slightly quirky. He's just kind of left alone. So what happens is the new product site that they've been working on that's in beta goes down. It only has beta clients, and they've been fairly understanding up until now. Alerts are going off. The alerts only go to Shelly's email. Shelly starts an IM conversation with Rob, who's of course in a meeting, right? And Shelly says, I think the site is down. And Rob's like, the whole site is down? Shelly's like, I think so. Who changed something, said Rob. Shelly says, I don't know. This isn't true. Shelly knows. Ethan was heads down coding with his headphones on all morning. And Shelly doesn't feel comfortable sharing things like this that make Ethan look bad, since he, of course, is the rock star. She's done this in the past. It blows up on her. So she simply says, I don't know. And Rob's like, why not? How the hell can we not know? Get it back up. Shelly says, we don't know how. And Ethan's not at his desk. And Rob starts to type, well, I'm coming to find out. So in our developer area, we've got Shelly and Tabby and Michael. They're discussing what to do next there in the developer's bay. And Rob shows up. Rob says, we have to get this back up. Have you guys tried anything? And a series of things are tried. They all make it worse and do not bring the site back up. 15 minutes later, Ethan shows up from a walk that he's been on. Rob says, where the hell have you been? Ethan said, I was taking a walk. But Ethan says, wait until you see the new features I added to our beta site. Rob says, the site is down, so it was you. Ethan's like, what? I told Shelly to review it. She always finds everything that's wrong. This is true. Shelly does find a ton of bugs. But Shelly was shut in the conference room interviewing for a new job this morning and didn't really look at the code that close and just hit the button to let it deploy. Shelly says, don't put this on me. The code should have been built in a continuous integration pipeline. But as if we're ever going to have time to do that on our team. Finger pointing continues. The site is still down. It remains down for a couple of hours as they manually back out those changes. And Rob leaves in frustration and says, you need to figure this out. This can't happen again. I've already missed 2 meetings and I have to go to this next one. So the team is left there dejected and defeated. Does this sound painful? Hopefully I didn't trigger any of you with a story, because unfortunately it's a brutally honest depiction of scenarios that I've seen over and over in software and IT. But what about this is wrong? We see this happen. We know it happens. Like, what do we do to get out of this spiral? There's a book called Just Culture. It's written by Sidney Decker. He talks about healthcare a lot, and he talks about restoring trust and accountability in your organization. He's a professor at the Griffith University in the Gold Coast, Australia. He breaks it down into 2 different kinds of justice. The first one is retributive justice. This is the one where we naturally ask, which rule was broken? Who actually broke that rule? How bad was the breach? And what should the consequences be? And who gets to decide this? These are the questions you ask to get justice when you're being retributive, or trying to get retribution. Before I explain what a restorative just culture is, I want to bring up an important book. It's called Dealing with People You Can't Stand. I highly recommend this book. I actually listened to the audio version read by the 2 authors, Dr. Rick Brinkman and Dr. Rick Kirshner. And I've listened to it all the way through twice at different points in my life. They break it down into 10 types of people. And the thing that you realize through this book is that at many points in your life, you are one of the 10 types of people. What we actually saw Rob be, in some ways, was either a tank or a sniper. You're not one of these things throughout your life, but you do end up being some of these things at different points. So if we look at maybe still getting justice, but now having a restorative culture instead of a retributive one, the differences are we're going to ask different questions. We're going to ask who is hurt. We're going to ask what do they need? And whose obligation is it to meet that need? And how do you involve the community in this conversation? Anecdotally, I'm the father of 3 children. So we've instituted questions close to this in our home whenever anyone was hurt. The questions that we ask each other are you hurt? And I have 3 daughters. They're all below the age of 6. And I say, where does it hurt? Can you point to it? Because sometimes it's their arm or their leg or whatever. And then what can I do to help you? Can I get you a Band-Aid? Can I get you a boo-boo bag, which are these little bags with beans in them that we have in the freezer. And to be honest, they're not very cold. And they are not making any swelling go down, but boy, do they work wonders. They make the girls feel better, and they make them feel better quickly. They don't hold on there for a while, but someone did something for you. Because what you're trying to do is restore what was actually broken. So I want to run through an alternate universe. Rather than give you an epiphany where Rob figures things out, we're going to screech things back to 2 years ago before you even knew Rob. And we're going to fork reality. And we're going to go back over this past year up to this incident and see what happens that's different. The one big change is that they have regular retrospective meetings on their team. So Rob still reviews code now in this alternate universe. And he comments on that code to stay in touch with the team. But he rarely commits code. He's not generating new stuff, but he knows what the team is doing. He's watching the code reviews and commenting once in a while. Rob's schedule now looks like this, where he's blocked out times that he actually works with his teams. He has one-on-ones with the 4 people on his team, alternating every 2 weeks for an hour. So he makes sure that he's connecting with them. He doesn't take a meeting that doesn't have an agenda. He also tries to get all of his meetings to be 30 minutes or less and in the morning, unless he can otherwise help it. Rob likes his job. Rob optimizes regularly on how can we make things better. And Rob connects with his team regularly and asks if he can sit down and pair with the brilliant people that are on his team. Rob refers to Ethan, instead of a rock star, as a mentor. And Ethan is responsible for any of Michael's questions. If Michael has a new question, it's part of Ethan's job to make sure that he's entertaining those questions and at least giving him a nudge to go in the right direction. Rob refers to Shelley as his quality guru. Shelley actually likes her job. The team that she chose to be on, that's doing all this cool stuff, she doesn't want to leave it. And the new engineer that joined the team about a year ago is actually productive and regularly has work to do. And actually is moving on a trajectory where she'll probably become a senior engineer quite a bit faster than a normal engineer would. Michael's still a little quirky. Because he's getting attention, like they understand where those quirks come from. And he's actually been integrated into the team within the month or 2 that he's been there. The differences this time around is instead of using these one-on-one IMs, they're using a group chat. They're actually using Slack on their team. You could use whatever it is. But they actually use this group chat and have a team channel, and they can see where things are at. The alerts are assigned to a rotation. They're using pager duty. Instead of an alert just going to Shelley's email because she's the one that set it up and no one else wanted to get the emails. The alerts are actually posted to the group chat, so the team all sees them. So they can set up different rules so that when Ethan's out for a walk, he can actually be alerted. He also gets to wreck things from page duty when he's the one that is actually assigned on the rotation. And the acknowledgments of those incidents are actually visible to the entire team. The code is now built in CI and CD because they've actually taken time to prioritize that against their other work. Now, instead of manually removing code, what they have in place is a rollback to switch the DNS back. And they have a rule on their team that if they're having issues, they have a 10-minute window, and then they switch things back. So when they deploy things, they've got their existing site, they pull it up on like DNS-A, and then they bring up the site on DNS-B. Then they just switch over to the new live site. If a bunch of things go wrong, they switch it back. And they actually schedule blameless post-mortems when there's incidents. They have less incidents, and they actually talk through things in retrospectives quite a bit. So for this particular incident, they had a blameless post-mortem, and they decided they wanted a test environment that was just like prod, because they found differences between the two. And that's what actually, they made bad assumptions based on the way the test environment was. Now, because they use this DNS-A, DNS-B, as they do today, they're going to start testing before they make the switch. So it's auto-deployed into DNS-B. They do at least a little bit of testing before they make that switch. Possibly that way they can eliminate the 10 minutes of downtime before they switch back. So remember just a bit ago when we said this was about trust? Think to yourself for a minute. If you're in a leadership position, are you actually creating trust? If you work for a leader, do you trust that leader? So no matter where you're at, all things can improve. How can you go back to work on Monday and work to improve? And that's something that I feel like you should take a minute to write down right now. How could you possibly get more trust? You can also yell things out if you like. But no need if you don't want to. Okay. Justice. I feel like in both scenarios that I described to you were ones in which like the pure form of justice was served. Like the idea that like a punishment or reward based on the actions. However, there's a big difference between the first one that was retributive and the second one that was restorative. Retributive justice achieves accountability by looking back on the harm that was done, whereas restorative justice achieves accountability by looking ahead to meet those needs and repair and trust the relationships that were harmed. This is directly from Sidney Decker as he describes it in Just Culture. So, that was contrived. It was made up. But it was made up from things that I've actually experienced. I want to take you through something that actually happened in the real world that I wasn't part of either. And then I'm going to take you through some things that I actually was part of and actually are hard for me to talk about. But first I want to take you through the one that's easy, because I wasn't part of it. Has anybody ever heard of the Fremont Assembly Plant? You have?
Yes, I have.
It's a 411, have you heard of it? It's this 411-acre manufacturing plant out in California. At the time of the closure, the Fremont employees, and this is from Wikipedia, were considered the worst workforce in the automobile industry in the United States. According to the UAW, or the United Auto Workers, employees drank alcohol on the job, were frequently absent, enough so that the production line couldn't be started at times, and even committed petty acts of sabotage, such as putting Coke bottles into the door panels so they'd rattle and annoy the customer. They shut down Fremont. It wasn't going good. The plant got bought by Toyota. They renamed it the NUMMI plant. And in spite of that history and reputation, when NUMMI reopened, that factory for production in 1984, most of those troublesome GM employees were rehired. They wanted them. Some of them they sent to Japan to learn the Toyota production systems. And the workers who made the transition identified the emphasis on quality and teamwork by that Toyota management is what motivated their change in their work ethic. They were sent to Japan and they were trained, but almost right away, I think within a year or less, the Numi factory was producing cars with as few defects per 100 cars as they were producing in Japan. Same exact people, different way of thinking about the management. Coincidentally, this is a very storied plant. Toyota does not build cars there anymore, for economic reasons. I'm not exactly sure why. But it actually is where the Tesla, some of the early Teslas, and I'm not sure if they're still there, but a lot of the Teslas, and not on the whole 411 acres, but it's where the Tesla was manufactured. Which Tesla's super awesome because they've kind of thrown away this idea of the year, make, and model to a degree. There are definitely different models, but you can download the software and like upgrade your cars, which is pretty awesome. If you've never seen it, you should check out the Netflix Culture Deck. This was put out there by Reed Hastings, and it's on SlideShare, and it's probably still one of the most popular slide decks that's ever been on SlideShare. In it, Reed explains the culture that he wants at Netflix. And it's a really good culture. I actually saw Adrian Cockcroft speak, not last year, but the year before at DevOps Enterprise Summit. And it was awesome because he explained how at this one point he was at a conference, and one of the CTOs, I think, in the audience that was from a really big company is like, we can't be like Netflix. We don't have all the superstar engineers that you have. And Adrian pretty much just said, like off the cuff, right there, we hired them from you. And just got out of their way. So same people, different results. Westrom has a model where he explains different types of cultures. Westrom calls the culture that we want a generative culture. It's one where there's high cooperation, the messengers are trained instead of shopped, and the risks are shared instead of shirked. We encourage bridging, and failure leads to inquiry instead of scapegoating, and the novelty is implemented rather than the novelty crushed. This is a big difference. This is kind of what we saw in those two examples. So I'm going to take you through my personal journey, the different type of meetings that I've tried to hold to change culture over the last 10 years. I was working at a company in roughly about 2007 or 2008. I wasn't even 30 years old yet, but a new position was created for me, and the position was called Quality Architect. We had what I would consider a pretty severe defect problem. The reason this position was created for me is we were doing a workout session where we were trying to figure out why we had so many what we called initially used to work defects. And then that got around to support said that to clients, and then our CEO was like, you can't call those anymore. Those are previously functional. So we had to change it to previously functional. We did this workout where we were trying to gather data and we were trying to figure out what it was, why we had so many used to work defects. Now our service packages, when they were going out, had a great rate of fixing the problem. I think it was like high 90s. They also had about a 50% chance of breaking something else. So this was desktop software. Our clients didn't trust us. They didn't want to take our new packages and fix stuff because they knew it was going to break something else. what I saw across the company and what I spoke about a lot of times in those meetings was that there's an apathy across our workers. There's finger pointing. There's different things. So what I was given the opportunity to do is we took the entire development organization, and there was maybe about 30-some teams, but we grouped a couple teams together and we made it 20. And we had a 4-week cycle. So for me, every single day, I sat in a room and listened to, I actually did the analytics and pulled the highest interesting defects that they had recently. They were more interesting if they had a higher severity, if they had any type of patient safety issues. It was a healthcare company. If they were marked to actually make the software crash, or different factors like that. But we came up with an algorithm. We're like, these are your top 10. And we're going to talk through those, and we're going to do the 5 whys on them. So for an example, my favorite example to use on doing this 5 why type of thing is someone comes in and they're late to work. You're like, well, why were you late to work? They're like, well, my car wouldn't start. Fair enough. Why wouldn't your car start? Because like at this point I'm thinking, well, you know, we pay you fairly well. You should probably get a more reliable car. But we're going to keep going down, right, and ask why again. So why didn't your car start? Well, the battery was dead. Fair enough. Why was the battery dead? Well, I left the car door open all night. All right, well, so it's not that your car's not reliable. Why'd you leave the car open all night? Well, I got home really late. All right. Why'd you get home so late? Well, I was out drinking all night with my friends. Right? So we're coming to a totally different thing. Like initially I'm like, we need to figure out getting you a new, more reliable car. Now, I'm thinking, well, maybe we need to address, why are we drinking so much, right? You end up in a different place if you ask these whys more often. So at the time I was young, I got this quality architect thing, and I'm trying to figure out like what is the definition of quality. I'm out there reading books about quality. The one that stuck out in my mind at the time was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, where Robert Pearsall tries to explain quality. I wish I would have known this before I read the book. From basically the author, he's like, this really isn't about Zen Buddhism, and it's really not that factual about motorcycles either. But what he describes in the book as he goes through kind of this crazy period in his life where he's looking back on mistakes that he's made in a number of things, is this romantic versus this classical view of quality. And a friend of the narrator decides for his motorcycle that he's not going to learn how to maintain it. He's bought an expensive motorcycle and it should just work, and if it doesn't, he also is going to get very expensive maintenance on the motorcycle. It's this very romantic idea of I've just got this awesome thing and it just works and it'll all take care of it. Whereas the narrator actually has a classical view of things. He's got an older bike. He usually does all of the diagnosis and repair through using rational problem solving. And what he's fighting with throughout this book is this idea of this romantic idea of quality and this classical idea of quality. I usually tend towards the classical. I want to tear things apart and put them back together, and I think that's how you get quality. But this was something that even to this day I'm still trying to figure out how to apply this to quality. For my favorite author, Kurt Vonnegut, he explains that another flaw in the human character is that we all want to build and nobody wants to do that maintenance. So in these meetings with these 20 different teams, I sat and I asked the question of why, and we classified their errors. We did this over the course of 3 months, and I kept a database on this application that I built on top of it. And then I gave them a report back and said, listen, for these 30 defects, this 3 months worth of work, when we had these discussions, here's where you classified your defects the most. Here's what you think you should actually focus on. And most of them were surprised. They were like, well, that's not what we thought our problems were. We thought our problems was with this other team. Those things are addressable by us. And to be honest, this was a hard time in my life. Not all 20 teams were like, oh yeah, let's do this fun thing. There was one particular team where the leader found me in a bar one night and told me that I was ruining his team because they were spending so much time trying to figure out where their issues were. They didn't have time for this, and he was yelling at me. His wife's behind him. It was weird, right? Like this is what went on. But at the same time, I was also applying Pareto to a lot of things. There was only a couple of the teams that were like that were so against me and so against this idea of trying to make things better. The teams towards the top, and actually a lot of the teams, they took that report back, and then what we did is we did 3 more months of doing this root cause thing, and then they actually gave us back a presentation when the next 3 months were over of the things they started doing on their team to make things better. And actually, quality got quite a bit better, which I'll get to in a couple slides. I caution you against using the 5 whys. They've actually fallen out of favor. One of my favorite authors on the subject of postmortems has a great blog on the infinite hows, or the dangers of the 5 whys. So when we're asking why, we're really asking how. And doing this in a group is very important. Not doing this by just an individual that gathers the information. And even though this 5 why thing is very easy to grasp, I think I explained it to you, and you're like, oh, I get that in a couple sentences. It's very tunnel visioned. And a lot of times, the trap you fall into is you end up still blaming a person at the end of this. So it's not the best tool. However, it did work for us. So over the next couple of years at that company, the quality of the software actually improved dramatically. This blog was written in 2012 about our company. And there were many factors that went into this. It wasn't just the root cause thing that we were doing. There was also a good thing about an upgrade center. But our package quality did go up quite a bit. What I felt like we did was we interjected a conscience back into this development where this apathy was living. By learning from these past mistakes, and then actually making people realize that they could make changes to their culture instead of just blaming other people. So the quote from the article was, as a result of these and other changes, CERN's class ranking has skyrocketed, moving from 7th to 2nd in a 4-year period, from December 2007 to December 2011, which was a really good feeling. Like the things that we put in place, and there were a number of them. By no means was it just the meetings we had, but our package quality went up tremendously. Not just root cause analysis, which was the last one, there's also a post-mortem meeting. I've already brought up John Allspaw, but he wrote an awesome blog on the topic of blameless post-mortem and a just culture. What I've taken from this is not exactly what he says in his blog, but what we did on our team was before the meeting, we created a timeline of the incidents. And we gathered facts, we gathered assumptions that people made, and expectations. We put that in timeline form. Then we put it up on a board, quite like this, and we talked through it as a group. During the meeting, we level set the expectations, basically saying the things that were acceptable and things that weren't. Any statement of could have or should have, not acceptable, because it doesn't matter. We don't care about what we could have done, we care about what actually happened. I think it's in this blog, it might be in another one, where Allspaw, and I've seen other people explain this, is that as engineers, what you've got is people who are inherent problem solvers. They want to solve problems with systems, and humans and groups of people are also systems. So a lot of times, if you give them the opportunity, they're also going to be able to figure out the social problems and the what's going on in the team if you get out of their way and you're not just retributive. We personally, based on what we were discussing without blame, which does come from the article, But we also only took action items that could be assigned and completed in the next week. Rather than just a bunch of things that we should do, someone left the room knowing that they had to have that done by the next time we had a retrospective meeting, which is the next meeting I'll go over. So I'm going to explain the situation where this blameless postmortem idea helped quite a bit. My team was a DevOps team, and I'm comfortable saying that because what we did was we set up a lot of cultural things, such as meetups, and we also wrote blogs on culture. My team's actual name was Operations Infrastructure, and we also wrote a bunch of tools, and we actually ran a bunch of tools. One of the tools we ran was Zabbix. So we were the development team. There was an operations team that we interfaced with. There was an infrastructure team. The infrastructure team would, their responsibility was to set up the machine and hand it off to that operations team. We didn't have an AWS type of thing where we could just like launch a machine, like someone had to actually go set the machine up. This was a physical machine. They gave it to the operations team, and then we were responsible for the application. We weren't responsible for the production application yet because we had written a chef cookbook to automate the maintenance down to this level for the machine administration. And that hadn't moved into prod yet. And then there was also SAN storage because the Zabbix that we were running had thousands of servers connected. Zabbix is an awesome company. They're based out of Riga, Latvia. We were using their open source for years, and then we got an enterprise license, and they're the nicest people. They came and saw this. It wasn't the biggest Zabbix that was ever run that they'd seen, but they said it was probably towards the top 10. What was happening was Zabbix was going down repeatedly, multiple times a week, usually at the proverbial 3 a.m. It was terrible. It was terrible for our team, it was terrible for their team. The operations team wore a pager. They had to get on the calls at 3 a.m. Our team did it because we weren't yet responsible for this. But it created this animosity. The operations team hated us because they were cranky. Because they got woke up at 3 a.m. all the time. And we didn't have to because we weren't yet responsible for it. Our team created this this feeling like if you only would just use our cookbook, you wouldn't have these problems. If you use our chef cookbook, there wouldn't be a problem in any type of way. It was getting so bad that talent was actually leaving their team. It was a really bad 3 to 6 months where this was going on. So at this point, we started doing these post-mortem meetings to try to figure out what it was. Because initially I was kind of coached to, like, you're not responsible for that yet. You're responsible for a lot of things. But we wanted to make sure, like, people are leaving their team, which is making things harder on us. What ended up happening is it was really a function of, and we did these post-mortems, and we had a wiki page that was like this long with just links to each of the post-mortems. There was probably 2 or 3 dozen of them. And so we started categorizing all those post-mortems for their causes and stuff, and it always ended up being the SAN. They always got the SAN team involved. SAN team looked and said, we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. This machine was set up before my team got involved by like a year or 2 by this infrastructure team, which wouldn't check their stuff into source control. But they did have a bunch of scripts. They had a bunch of corn shell scripts or bash scripts. And one of the files they set up was this file called etsymultipath.conf. What this does is it lists the vendors for SAN, for the storage array network, so that the drivers actually work. This was done 2 years ago. Sometime in that 2 years, we added another vendor. But there's no regular check to check this file and add that. And my team was actually involved because the Zabbix server was growing so big that we were doing forecasting, and we're the ones that said we should add more sand because we're going to run out of space on the MariaDB database that's back there. So by adding this sand, which we didn't know this was a thing, like we didn't know that it's opaque to us. We didn't know that the company was buying sand from a new vendor. We didn't know that file needed to be updated. So really the responsibility ended up being shared by a number of us. My team said we need more sand, right? Based on the numbers, and we're the math people, right? The operations team logged the issue with the infrastructure team. They actually added more sand. The infrastructure team never updated this file. I don't know if it was on a line item somewhere that they were supposed to do that. In the end, we eventually got this this one file cleaned up. After a few months of our team not being engaged, and then a few more months of our team being engaged and trying to get to this problem. But the damage had already been done, like, at that point. It did actually fix things quite a bit, and those 3 a.m. calls like fell off a cliff, and they were more like once a month than twice a week. So we were able to focus on different things. So this meeting was
what do you mean by the damage was already done? You're talking about between the teams?
Between the teams, just wasn't a good situation. We did bring some of the camaraderie back, but like some of the people left. Like, you can't go back on that. You can't, like, maybe you could possibly go out and rehire that person and say, hey, remember that team that was so bad that you left the company? You want to come work for us again? Yeah. Right? Like, so we were working with newer people. The good thing, some of the newer people were really keen on you and Chef, and they actually took our cookbook that we were running our Zavik development area, and they made it work. Made it work in prod, which was killer.
So that's that question, especially since we have a small group here.
Yeah, go.
I had a very similar experience to that, except that even happened before I got on the scene as a cat to play the game, so to speak. And to your knowledge of what you're saying, okay, you have this situation that happens, and you can look at it in retrospect and go, wow, that was an easy thing to solve. You know, it really, the root cause wasn't too bad, whatever, but you got this collateral damage thing that's happened out there. And people start dancing to the collateral damage as opposed to dancing to what really needs to be taken care of. What was your long-term, how you dealt with it, if I may ask there? Was it just something you had to accept and say, hey, that's the way it is, and there's nothing, whatever, or whatever?
Not directly because of this, but I eventually ended up leaving that company too.
Okay.
Like, things got sour over time.
Okay.
And sometimes I think that's the only option left. Like, it's not the best option.
Sure.
I totally think that people should try to fix things, and that's always been what I've done through those root cause analysis meetings, through the post-mortem meetings and stuff, and through the next meeting that I'm going to show you. But there's a point, right? Similar to the 10-minute thing, where we switch back. You know, you have to time box things for yourself personally. You have to time box things for your group.
Okay.
There's an excellent book called The Human Side of Postmortems, where David Zwiebek outlines stress, but the thing I like is bias. There's a lot of different cognitive biases. This book is short. Yeah, I think it's maybe about 30 pages, even with like the table of contents and the whole thing. Very consumable, and you get it from O'Reilly for free a lot of times, right? And the biases are hindsight bias, like knowing what we know now, like we were just talking about, like with that one file. Oh, change that one file. That was easy. It caused 6 months of pain for roughly a dozen people. Outcome bias, attaching how bad the issue was with the decisions that were made. That's 6 months of pain. Like we as humans were really mad at the one person who wouldn't automate or even check into source control his stuff. Availability bias, overestimating things that are easily recalled and underestimating things that are easily forgotten. So this one's interesting. The example I use here is a lot of times you think of tornadoes, especially in this area. Tornadoes kill a lot of people. Bad, right? Probably kill more people than asthma. No, asthma kills more people, but asthma's not on your news, you know, showing the terrible devastation, right? So, like, you have this idea in your head that, like, you know, like, tornadoes are terrible killers. Asthma is actually worse. So, like, the things that you recently recall or more strongly recall are the things that take over. Easily applicable a lot of times to, like, when you're trying to find good error reasons and stuff. There's also the sunk cost bias. We've already been doing this for a long time, so we're just going to eat the whole bowl. I can't remember where I heard this story about, like, you know, someone in college that would make this bowl of, you know, food that they got for ramen noodle, 10-cent type of thing, and they're like, it's terrible. Like, I ate the whole bowl because I started it, you know, like, if it's terrible, stop it. It was 10-cent ramen, right? And then confirmation bias. This is where we're finding data that just confirms what we wanted to hear in the first place. So potentially, an example in the world is if you're either like an MSNBC or Fox watcher, a lot of times they'll deliver content that you want to hear. And you eat it up because it's like, that's what I wanted anyways. You'll see this in your Facebook feed if you start to bubble off. Like, you just see the things, you start getting that confirmation of this is what I already believe. And it's very easy to define yourself into those bubbles, even when you're working with large sets of data, because you're like, I want the data to say this so bad. So you find ways to make the data to say something. It doesn't really say that though. Another great point that I want to pull from Zwieback's stuff is this is not about lowering stress to zero. If you've got an easy task, actually, when there's a little bit more stress, you actually do better at it. Think of like when you wake up in the morning, you haven't had whatever your morning routine is, coffee, a run, or whatever. Like, you're just not all there. You need a little bit of stimulation. So it's not about getting rid of stress. It's about finding that maximum. If you have too much stress, or if you have people being assholes, like, it's too much, and then you actually fall back off the cliff, and the performance goes down incredibly. So the final kind of meeting I'm going to talk about is retrospective meeting. I ran a development team. We do these every 2 weeks. We'd start the meeting at the first 10 minutes, and people could have their computers open for this part of the meeting, and they would review quietly throughout the room. They'd have sticky notes, and they'd write down the accomplishments, the things that they accomplished. They would also, in addition to write down the accomplishments, they would write down a thank you note to someone on the team that helped them. Then as a group, we would take those sticky notes and we'd put them on a board, not that much different than this. We'd use markers, and we'd draw up their mad, or like sometimes we would draw teeth. We'd try to laugh as much as we could in that meeting. And then we would categorize them about the things that actually happened. We'd move them into those spaces. Some of the things, sometimes in the 2 weeks, we'd have things that made us really mad. I actually call this our feels meeting. We talked about our feelings as a team. I felt like this was hugely constructive. We had a very highly functioning team, and we didn't allow things to fester. If there were problems, we tried to address them. There was a lot of things in these meetings that were like, we're not going to talk about this in a group. We'll talk about this one-on-one with these people. And then what we did was we posted these publicly. We posted them in an area where everyone in the company could see them. We weren't scared. Like, sometimes we had problems with other teams. And we we posted that like this team made our job harder. And again, we would take action items that had to be followed up in the next 2 weeks, that had to have someone assigned to them, and sometimes those action items were to actually go talk to the manager of that team, which I had to take on a lot of times. But sometimes there was other people on the team. They would go and like, we need to repair this relationship. We need to make this better. Kurt Vonnegut, my favorite author of all time, one of his older books in the 60s, Sirens of Titan. It's this cool thing where this guy's like in this big blue, kind of like Halley's Comet, but that's where he lives. He's only on Earth for a little while, right? But he gets to see the whole universe. And there's this encyclopedia of the different things in the universe. And part of the beginning of the encyclopedia is like, now you can say your daddy is right, and the other child's daddy is wrong. Because you've got a kid with two different kids in two different parts of the universe, and their dads. But the universe is an awfully big place, and there's room enough for an awful lot of people to be right about things and still not agree. And this is what I took in like into these retrospective meetings. Is this isn't about, I mean, like, two people can be right in the room and not agree, and that can be okay, right? And we may have to, as a group, either vote for something. I may have to make the decision as the leader and explain that, and one person probably going to have hurt feelings because it wasn't their way. But what their way, like, it's not that it was wrong, it was just we have to pick one, right? And this is something you have to explain over and over to people because the feelings are going to get hurt. Because as technical people, a lot of times we attach a lot of value to what it is that we produce, even if what we produce are simply ideas. So these 3 types of meetings have worked for me to some degree. I've brought things out of fairly bad dips, and I've kept things going without falling into dips with the last one, with the retrospective meetings. The root cause analysis meetings we do monthly. Post-mortem meetings were per incident until they started getting so big we had to group them together, and then they were twice a week. And then fortnightly, because bi-monthly is too confusing to humans, so we always said fortnightly because it sounds funny, but bi-monthly can be twice a month or it can be once every other month. Again, back to John Allspaw, who his writings on his blogs at both Etsy and his personal blog, which I believe is called Kitchen Soap, just last week tweeted, the dilemma, of course, is accurately anticipating which meetings will repair costly potential misunderstandings and which won't. I am not suggesting that people meeting themselves to death. I don't care for meetings. I do think that if you have a once in a while meeting where you're addressing these things, that you can be lucky enough to be the ones who have an engaged workforce. Because as we stated at the very beginning, chances are 2 out of 3 people on your team are not engaged. They're not actively trying to make the team succeed. Here's references to the things I talked about. I will put my deck up on aaronblythe.org. I have a link for presentations. And you can complete this survey. You could win a $50 Best Buy gift card, which is on the slide. But this survey is how they're going to do all of the raffles for all of the things. So that's all I got. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the things you were mentioning here at the end right there, and I'm just kind of curious on this, talk about having the meetings to kind of, you know, get the things aired out, what have you, talk about the engagement of people involved there. Did you ever run into a situation where you had a highly engaged group, but there were certain issues with the engagement very wildly on? In other words, you know, we have a tendency to view engagement as, you know, an all or nothing proposition. Either somebody's just totally tuned out or whatever, but there may be certain issues that are very engaged on, and then there's a certain set of issues the engagement drops off tremendously, and that may be something that you're trying to get people focused to. And did you run into those, and how did you guide it back into getting people's engagement with that?
We had this terrible problem where people would always bring their computers to meetings and they would just tune out. And the way that I combated that, I talked about this a little bit, was that I personally would not go to a meeting without an agenda. And if the meeting was longer than an hour, I would ask the person who sent me the meeting, why is this longer than an hour? I had many meetings where it was closed laptop. The retrospective meetings were closed laptop other than that 10-minute of quiet time at the beginning. And we were in there for a reason. And the reason was stated at the beginning. The postmortem meetings, it was really, really important for us to say, like, the word could have and should have is the trigger. Someone raise your hand. We don't allow that, right? If you feel like someone's blaming, raise your hand and we stop that line of reasoning. But having those set rules, now this was weird. I was lucky enough that I was in charge of this group of people, so I got to make the decision.
Yeah.
Suggesting this to other groups, I've had problems. I've had pushback. And again, in those situations, you have to decide, is this a culture and a group that I want to be a part of? And I'm not saying quit your job or I've been to talks where people have been like, yeah, that sounds crappy, just quit. I'm like, I don't think that's the idea. That's the idea here at all. You try to make things better by talking and working through things. But yeah, as far as people not being engaged, you're gonna see that. And sometimes it's as simple as having a one-on-one conversation with them after the meeting. Being like, you know what people don't hear in tech very often? Is everything all right? It's not very often that people have said that to me. Is everything all right? Is there something that I can help with or whatever? Another great opener for getting people engaged is, would it be all right if I could give you some feedback? If they say no, fuck it. They weren't open to the feedback.
Yeah.
If you were to give them feedback, then you're probably just gonna make them angry at you, right? So good. At least I didn't say that. Now you're got animosity towards me forever. But if they say yes, which most people will, you've turned the ears on that person. You've turned the reception on. Having those little conversations outside of the meeting afterwards have been invaluable to me. And they have to be genuine. You can't BS through those, and you have to be attentive, and you have to know what you want to accomplish in those conversations, because you're about to bring up something big with somebody. Can I give you some feedback? Is that all right? Or we, and then you got to follow through. You can't go halfway through. Oh, this sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those ones are rough. Don't do those in a really confrontational situation at first. Do them with someone to practice that you have a good rapport with. And one of the trainings that I was in over 6 months to a year, we were always like, would it be alright if I give you some feedback? And then what you're supposed to respond with is, yes, feedback is a gift. But it's so hokey or whatever, but we only met once a month, and it was something that it made it stick in our head that giving feedback and trying to raise that consciousness is an important thing. So,
Okay.
thank you
Very
both.
good.
Thanks. Yeah.